Although you can clearly see male genitalia, there's something also ambiguous about it, as if Sheila himself is searching for what it is that he's really about. And he describes himself on numerous occasions as an eternal child, and I think that idea looms very strong in this picture. But this also triggers a series of works where this anxiety and this search for himself as a sexual being puts him right at the forefront of radical European painting.
With Sheila, it was always his self-obsession, his narcissism, that manifests itself in these nude self-portraits. Here Sheila presents a frank, matter-of-fact, adolescent portrayal of himself masturbating. The subject of masturbation was very much taboo in turn-of-the-century Vienna, as it still is today. So Sheila's honesty in recording himself in this manner is quite remarkable, although there's probably a hint of adolescent provocation involved too.
And the other big theme that emerges dramatically in Sheila's self-portraiture is that of death, and nowhere is that more apparent in this work, one of a series of 3 that he made around the theme of what he called the self-seer or self-observer, although this work is also called Man and Death. What we have initially, when we look at it, is a double self-portrait. Sheila, produced out of a miasma of paint, almost sculpturally formed at the centre, with this mask-like face looking almost blankly out at us. But then in the background, a spectre or a phantom that both seems to emerge from the back of his head and also threatens to envelop or become part of Sheila once again. Now, this is part of a German literary tradition known as the doppelganger, where the idea is that at the moment of your death, your exact double appears. It's one of the last things that you see. And in a way, he's in keeping with the theories of Sigmund Freud, who later on publishes a book called Beyond the Pleasure Principle, where he says Eros, the life force, isn't just the only dominant force in the human mind and human psychological makeup. There's also the death force, or Thanatos. It's all there in this picture. But there's also, in the way that paint is used so expressively, another kind of feeling here. Look at the hands. Look at these gestures. Look at the way that the hands make the sign of the cross. There's almost an air of martyrdom here. Look how the hands also seem to, on one hand, to be a thumb missing. On another, there's no digits at all. And there's something of self-mutilation going on here. And what we get when Sheila produces a self-portrait is not just the idea of a man looking at himself in the mirror, but a man who's trying to see himself with something approaching an X-ray vision, and also with a prophetic vision, as if to see what might happen to him, as well as to discover what is actually happening to him.
The mirror features prominently in this drawing, where Sheila studies himself in the act of painting. He scrutinises and draws both himself and the female nude, a subject for which he'd become famous and infamous, and which would lead to his imprisonment.
Self-portraiture was the means through which Sheila began his radical assault on the conventions of European figure painting. But there were other themes that interested him, and also he had to make money. So predominantly, 2 areas emerged. Firstly, and most respectably, portraiture.
Here the magazine publisher, Edward Kosmak, stares manically at the viewer from an almost vacant space. In the background, we can see what look like claw marks down the wall, and to the right, a sunflower. His elongated hands, a Sheila trademark, are placed nervously between his legs, whilst Kosmak seems to possess a certain power. The gaze which pierces the viewer has been associated with Kosmak's interest in hypnotism. But later, Sheila changed his style and started to include the environment of the sitter in the portraits. Here, Hugo Koller, the industrialist and bibliophile, sits surrounded by his piles of books.
And the second area that Sheila made his own, and which also generated a substantial income for him, and which also led to the production of confident, almost brash, erotic masterpieces like this one later in his career, was, of course, the female nude.
His first model was his sister Gertie, whom Sheila seems to have had an unusually close relationship with. Her head faces away from us, and the composition is cut off at the top and at the knees. Sheila's clearly focusing our attention on the genitals. Sheila had no trouble finding other models to pose for him, producing a large number of figure drawings throughout his life. In 1911, at the age of 21, Sheila met the woman who was to serve as the model for some of his best and most acutely erotic drawings. Her name was Vally, or Wally Neusel, who was 17. Wally had previously posed for Sheila's mentor, Klimt. She inspired in Sheila the kind of erotic fantasies on which his art thrived. These drawings are the expression of a physical passion so far unequalled in Sheila's life.
In 1911, together with Wally, his mistress and his model, Sheila decided to leave Vienna and go instead to the old town of Krumau, where his mother had been born, now in the Czech Republic. There, he painted a series of landscapes.
Man-made environments and nature played an important but subsidiary role in Sheila's art, acting as a kind of necessary relief from the stress of his work with the human figure. Sheila created in his townscapes a vivid pattern of form and colour in an almost abstract cubist style. And here, in A Tree in Late Autumn, Sheila shows the continuity he saw between things and animate beings by making the tree almost come to life. Looking at it, we can almost see a figure dancing.
But in Krumau, Sheila and Wally faced problems, not least because of their bohemian lifestyle and the perception that Sheila was both promiscuous and irreligious. And in the end, they were forced to leave. So they decided to move back closer to Vienna, to the town of Neulengbach, not far from Sheila's birthplace in Tulln. There, he set up a studio, which in turn became a gathering place for younger people, many of whom were willing to be painted, and some in various states of undress. Like the people of Krumau, the residents of Neulengbach were not impressed, but this time the results were rather different. Complaints were made to the police, who, when they arrived at Sheila's studio, discovered explicitly erotic drawings in portfolios and also pinned to the walls. But there was worse to come. A specific allegation was made that Sheila had seduced a young girl below the age of consent. And while the matter was investigated, Sheila was put in prison. After 2 weeks in jail, Sheila was sent for trial. The charges of seduction and abduction were dropped, but he was found guilty of exhibiting an erotic drawing in a place accessible to children. In addition, the judge made a point at the end of the trial of burning one of Sheila's erotic drawings in front of the assembled crowd, and, in addition, sentenced Sheila to 3 days in prison to go with the 21 that he'd already spent in custody.
But the sentence was in fact lenient. If Sheila had been convicted of corrupting a minor, he could have faced 20 years of hard labour. Whilst in jail, Sheila did a series of drawings of his surroundings and more self-portraits. This one is called The Single Orange Was the Only Light, a reference to the dim conditions in which Sheila found himself.
News of the affair quickly reached Vienna, and Sheila's already notorious reputation was established permanently so. Sheila never denied making works of art, both drawings and watercolours, that were erotic, but he insisted, as many have done since, that a work of art is not pornographic if it's artistically significant. He also added that filth, as he put it, was only filth if the beholder himself had a filthy mind.